Hi, everyone, and let's see. Letter 74, Miss Howe to Miss Clarissa Harlow, Sunday, April 2nd. I ought yesterday to have acknowledged the receipt of your parcel. Robin tells me that Joseph Lehman, when you mentioned whom you mentioned as a traitor, saw him in the poultry yard and spoke to Robin over the bank, which divides that from the green lane. What brought you hither, Mr. Robert? But I can tell. He away as fast as you can. No doubt their dependent diligence, and upon Betty's leaves, you more at liberty in your errands than you would otherwise be. But you are the only person I've ever heard of who, in such circumstances, had not some faithful servant to trust little offices to. A poet, my dear, would have not have gone to work for an Angelica without giving her Violetta, her Clelia, or some pretty name confidant, an old nurse at least. I read to my mamma several passages of your letters, but your last paragraph in your yesterday's charmed her quite. You have won her heart by it, she told me, and while her fit of gratitude for it lasted, I was thinking to open my proposal and to press it with all earnest I could give it, when Hickman came in, making his legs and stroking his cravat and ruffles in turn. I could most freely have ruffled it for him as it was, sir. Saw you not some one of the servants? Could not one of them have come in before you? He begged pardon, looked as if he knew not whether he had best keep his ground or withdraw, till my mamma, why, Nancy, we are not upon peculiars. Pray, Miss Hickman, sit down. By your leave, good madam, you know his drawl when his muscles give him the respectful hesitation. Pray sit down, honest man, if you are weary. But, if you please, I desire my hoop may have it full circumference. All they're good for, that I know, is to clean dirty shoes and to keep ill mannered fellows at distance. Strange girl, cried my mamma, displeased, but with a milder turn. Miss Hickman, sit down by me. I have no such forbidden folly in my dress. I was serious, and in my heart was glad the speech of hers was not made to your Uncle Anthony. My mamma, with true widow's freedom, would not mightily prudently have led into our subject, had him see I question not the very paragraph in your letter which is so much in his favor. He was highly obliged to dear Miss Harlow, but she would assure him that she did say. But I did ask him if he had any news by his last letters from London, a question he always understands to be a subject changer, for otherwise I never put it. And so if he were but silent, I'm not angry with him that he answers it not. I choose not to mention my proposal before him till I know how it will be relished by my mamma. If it not be well received, perhaps I may employ him on the occasion. Yet I don't like to owe him an obligation if I could help it. For men who have friends do so parade it, so strut about, if a woman condescend to employ them in her affairs, that one has no patience with them. But if I find an opportunity this day, I will make it tomorrow. I shall not open either of your sealed up parcels, but in your presence there is no need. Your conduct is out of all question with me. By the extracts you have given me from his letters and your own, I know all that relates to the present situation of things between you. I was going to give you a little flippant hint or two, but since you wish to be thought superior of our sex in the command of yourself, and since indeed you deserve to be so thought, I will spare you. You are, however, more than, let's see, than half inclined to speak out. That you do not is only owing to the little bashful struggle between you and yourself, as I may say. But that is quite over got now. I know you will favor me undisguisedly with the result. I cannot forgive you taking up so extravagant a rate to pay my mamma's servant. Indeed, I am, and I will be angry with you for that. A year's wages at once? Why not? Only unknown to my mama, I make it better for the servants according to their merits. How it made the man stare, and it may be his ruin too, as far as I know. If he should buy a ring and marry a sorry body in the neighborhood with money, one would be loath a 12-month hence. That poor old fellow should think he had reason to wish the bounty never conferred. I must give you your way in these things, you say. I up to you upon little offices done for you, and too little upon great ones you do for others. The satisfaction you having in doing so, I grant it, repays you. But why should you, by the nobleness of your mind, throw reproaches upon the rest of the world, particularly upon your own family and upon ours too? If, as I have heard to say, it is by the good rule to give the words the hearing, but to form our judgments of men and things by deeds only, we shall think of one who seeks to find palliatives in words, for narrowness of heart and the very persons her deeds so silently yet forcibly reflect upon. Why blush you not, my dear friend, to be thus singular when you meet with another person whose mind is like your own? Then display your excellencies as you please, but till then, for pity's sake, let your heart and your spirit suffer a little contraction. I intended to write but a few lines, chiefly to let you know that your parcels have come and are safe. And accordingly, I began in a large hand, and I'm already come to an end of my second sheet. But I would write a quire without hesitation upon a subject so copious and so beloved as is your praise. Not this single instance of your generosity, since I'm really angry with you for it, but for the benevolence exemplified in the whole tenor of your life and actions, of which this is but a common instance. God directs you in your own arduous trials is all I have room to add, and make you happy as you think you are to be. Your own Anna Howe. Letter 75, Miss Clarissa Harlowe to Miss Howe, Sunday night, April 2nd. I have many new particulars to acquaint you with, that to show a great change in my friend's behavior to me. I did not think we had so much art amongst us as I find we have. I will give them to you as you've offered. All the family was at church this morning. They brought the good Dr. Llewellyn in with them in pursuance of a previous invitation. And the doctor sent up to desire my permission to attend me in my own apartment. You may believe it was easily granted. So the doctor came up. We had a conversation of near an hour before dinner, but to my surprise, he waived everything that would have led to the subject I supposed he wanted to talk about. At last, I asked him if it were not strange that I should be so long absent from church. He made me some handsome compliments upon it, but he said, for his part, he'd never made it a rule to avoid interfering in private concerns unless desired to do so. I was prodigiously disappointed, but supposing that he was thought too just a man to make a judge of in his cause, I led no more to it. Nor when he was called to dinner did he take the least notice of leaving me behind him there. But this was the first time since my confinement that I thought it a hardship not to dine below. And when I parted with him on the stairs, a tear would burst in its way, and he hurried down, his own good-natured eyes glistening, for he saw it, nor trusted he his voice, bless the accent, I suppose, should he have discovered his concern, departing in silence, though with his usual graceful obligationness. I hear that he praised me and my part in the conversation that we held together, to show, I suppose, that it was not upon the interesting subjects which I no doubt he was desired not to enter upon. He left me so dissatisfied, yet so perplexed with this new way of treatment, that I never found myself so puzzled, so much out of my train. But I was to be more so. That this was to be a day of puzzle to me, pregnant puzzle, if I may say, for there must great meaning lie behind it. In the afternoon, all but my brother and sister went to church with the good doctor, he who left his compliments for me. I took a walk in the garden. My brother and sister walked in it too, and kept me in their eye a good while on purpose, as I thought, and that I might see how gay and good-humored they were together. At last they came down the walk, and I was coming up, hand in hand, lover-like. Your servant, miss, your servant, sir, passed between my brother and me. Sister Clary, in a kinder voice than usual, said my sister, and stopped. I stopped and curtsied low to her half curtsy. I think not, sister, said I. She went on. I curtsied without return and proceeded, turning to my poultry yard. By a shorter turn, arm in arm, they were before me. I think, Clary, said my brother, you must present me with some of this breed for Scotland. If you please, brother, I'll choose for you, said my sister. And while I fed them, they picked out a half a dozen, yet intending nothing by it, I believe, but to show a deal of love and good humor to each other before me. My uncles next, after church was done, to speak in the common phrase, were to do me the honor of their notice. They bid Betty tell me that they would drink tea with me in my own apartment. Now, I thought, shall I have the subject of my next Tuesday forced upon me? But they contradicted the tea orders, and only my Uncle Harlow came up to me. Half distant, half affectionate was the air he put on for his daughter niece, as he used to call me, and I threw myself at his feet and besought his favor. None of these discomposures, child, none of these apprehensions. You'll now have everyone's favor. All is coming about, my dear. I was impatient to see you. I could no longer deny myself the satisfaction, and raised me and kissed me and called me charming creature. But he waved, entering into any interesting subject. All is what will be well now. All will be right. No more complaining. Everybody loves you. I only came to make my earliest court to you, were his condescending words, and to sit and talk of 20 and 20 fine things as I used to do, and let every past disagreeable thing be forgotten, as if not happened. He understood me as beginning to hint at the disgrace of my confinement. No disgrace, my dear, can fall to your lot. Your reputation is too well established. I long to see, repeated he. I have not seen nobody half as so amiable since I saw you last. And again, he kissed my cheek, my glowing cheek, for I was impatient. I was vexed to be thus, as thought played upon, and how could I was to be so grateful for a visit that was now evident was only to be too humble artifice to draw me in against the next Tuesday, or to leave me inexcusable to them all. Oh, my cunning brother, this is his contrivance. And then my anger made me recollect the triumph in him and my sister's loves to each other acted before me, and mingled indignation flashing from their eyes, as arm in arm they spoke to me, and the forced condescension played upon their lips. Clara and sister, do you think I could, with these reflections, look upon my Uncle Harlow's visit as the favor he seemed desirous I should think it should be? Indeed, I could not. And seeing him so studious of winning all recommendation, as I may call it, I gave into the affection and followed him in the talk of indifferent things, while he seemed to admire this thing, that thing, as if he'd never seen them before, and now and then condescendingly kissing the hand that wrought so much of the things he fixed his eyes upon, not so much to admire them, but to find subjects to divert what was most in his head and in my own heart. At going his way, how can at his going away, how can I leave you here by yourself, my dear? You whose company enlivened us all. You were not expected down, indeed, but I protest I had a good mind to surprise your papa and mamma, if I thought nothing would arise that would be disagreeable, my dear, my love. Oh, the artful gentleman! How could my Uncle Harlow be so dissembled? What say ye? Will you give me your hand? Will you see your father? Can you stand his first displeasure on seeing the dear creature who has given him all but so much disturbance? Can you promise future? He saw me rising my temper. Nay, my dear, if you cannot be all resignation, I would not have think it of you. My heart, struggling between duty and the warmth of temper, was full. You know, my dear, I could never bear to be dealt meanly with. How? How can you, sir? You, my papa, uncle, how can you, sir? The poor girl, for you could not speak with connection. Nay, my dear, if you cannot be all duty, all resignation, better stay here where you are. But after insistence, you have given insistence. I have given what insistence, sir? Well, well, child, better stay where you are if your past confinement hangs so heavy on you. But now there will be a sudden end to it. Adieu, my dear. 3 words only. Let your compliance be sincere and love me as you used to love me. Your grandfather did not do so much for you as I will do for you. Without suffering me to reply, he hurried away. I thought it as if it had been an escape, and was glad his part was over. Don't you see, my dear, they are all determined. Have I not reason to dread next Tuesday? Upon presently after came my sister, to observe, I suppose, the way I was in. She found me in tears. Have you not a Thomas a Kemper, sister? A little stiff air. I have, madame. Madame, how long have we been at this distance, Clary? No longer, if you allow me to call you sister, my dear Bella. And I took her hand. No fawning neither, girl. I withdrew my hand as hastily as if I should, if reaching at a parcel from under the wood and it had been bit by a viper. I beg pardon. Too ready to make advances. I'm already subjecting myself to contempt. People who know how to keep a middle behavior, said she, must evermore do so. I will fetch you the Kempis. I did. Here it is. You will find excellent things, Bella, in that little book. I wish, retorted she, you had profited by them. I wish you may, said I. Example from a sister older than oneself is a fine thing. Older, saucy little fool, and away she flung. What a captious old woman will my sister make? Captious old woman will my sister make, if she lives to be one, demanding the reverence, yet not aiming at merit, and ashamed of the years, that only can entitle her to the reverence. It is plain from what I have related that they think they have got me at some advantage by obtaining my consent to this interview. But if it were not, Betty's impertinence just now would make it even more evident. She had been complimenting me upon it, and upon my visit of Uncle Harlow, she says the difficulty now is more than half over with me. She is sure that I will not see Mr. Solmes, but to have him. Now shall she soon be better employed of late, as she has been. All hands will be at work. She loves dearly to have weddings go forward. Who knows whose turn will be next? I found in the afternoon a reply to my answer to Mr. Lovelace's letter. It is full of promises, full of gratitude, full of eternal gratitude. It is his word, among others still hyperbolic. Mr. Lovelace, at least of a man whose letters I have seen, runs into elevated absurdities. I should be apt to despise for him. If he did, such language looks always to me as the flatterer thought to find a woman a fool, or hoped to have make one. He regrets my indifference to him. He puts all hope, as he has in my favor, upon my friend's shocking usage of me. As to my charge upon him of politeness, of uncontrollableness, what, he asks, can he say? Since being unable absolutely to vindicate himself, he has too much ingenuity to attempt to do so, yet is struck dumb by my harsh construction that he has acknowledging temper is owing more of his carelessness to defend himself than his inclination to amend. He has never before met with this objective against his morals, which I have justly raised, and he was resolved to obviate them. What is it, he asked, that he had promised by my reformation, by my example? And what occasion for the promise, if he had not faults, and those great ones, to reform of? He hopes acknowledgement of an error is no bad sign, although my severe virtue has interpreted it to be one. He believes I may be right, so against making reprisals in the case of the intelligence he receives from my family. He cannot charge himself to be of temper that leads him to be inquisitive into anybody's private affairs, but he hopes that the circumstances of the case and the strange conduct of my friends will excuse him, especially when so much depends upon his knowing the movements of a family so violently bent by the measures right or wrong to carry their point against me in malice to him. People, he says, who act like angels ought to have angels to deal with. For his part, he has not yet learned the difficult lesson of returning good for evil, and shall think himself the less encouraged to learn by it by the treatment I have met with from the very spirits which he lay himself under their feet would trample upon him as they do upon me. He excuses himself for the liberties he owns and has therefore taken in ridicule in the marriage state. It is a subject, he says, that he has not of late treated so lightly. He owns it to be so trite, but beaten a topic with all libertines and witlings, so frothy, so empty, so nothing meaning, so worn out a theme, that he is heartily ashamed of himself ever to have made it his. He condemns it as a stupid reflection upon the laws and good order of society and upon man's own ancestors and himself, who has some reason to value himself upon his descent and alliances more censurable in those than have not been to the advantage of boast of. He promises to be more circumspect than ever, both in words and actions, that he may be more and more worthy of my approbation, and that he may give an assurance beforehand that a foundation is laid in his mind for my example to work upon, with equal reputation and an effort and an effect to us both, if he may so be happy to call me at this. He gives me up absolutely lost if I go to my Uncle Anthony's. The close confinement, the moated house, the chapel, the implacableness of my brother and sister, and the power over the rest of my family he sets forth in strong light, plainly hints that he must have a struggle to prevent my being carried thither. Your kind, generous, interesting of yourself in your mama's favor of me, I hope, will prevent these harsher extremities which I might otherwise be driven to. And to you I will fly, if permitted, and all keep my promise of not corresponding with anybody, not seeing anybody, but by your mama's direction and yours. I will close and deposit at this place. It is not necessary to say how much I am your ever affectionate and obliged Clarissa Harlowe. Letter 76, Miss Clarissa Harlowe to Miss Howe, Monday, April 3rd. I'm glad my papers are safe in your hands. I will make it my endeavor to deserve your opinion, that I may not at once disgrace your judgment and my own heart. I have another letter from Mr. Lovelace. He's extremely apprehensive of the meeting I'm to have with Mr. Solmes tomorrow. He says that the airs that wretch gives him on the occasion add to his concern, and it is infinitely difficult that he prevails upon himself not to make a visit to let him know what he may expect if compulsion be used towards me in his favor. He assures me that Mr. Solmes has actually talked with tradesmen of the new equipages and the names and people in town with whom he is treated, and that he even, was there ever such a horrid wretch, allotted this and an apartment in his house for nursery and other offices. How shall I bear to hear such a creature talk of love to me? I shall be out of all patience with him. Besides, I thought that he did not dare to make or talk of these imputed preparations, so inconsistent such as they are with my brother's views. But I fly the shocking subject. Upon this confidence of Solmes, you will less wonder at that of Lovelace, impressing me in the name of all his family to escape from such a determined violence as intended to be offered to me at my uncle's, that the forward contriver should propose his uncle's chariot, and 6 to be at the still that leads up to the lonely Capice, adjourning to our paddock. You will see how audaciously he mentions settlements ready drawn, horsemen ready to mount, and one of his cousins, Montague, to be in the chariot, or at George in the neighboring village, waiting to accompany me to Lord M.'s, or to either his aunt's or town, as I please. And upon such orders and conditions, and upon such restrictions as to himself, I shall prescribe. You will see how he threatens to, quote, watch and waylay them and rescue me, as he calls it, by an armed force of friends and servants if they attempt to carry me against my will to my uncle's. And this, whether I give consent to the enterprise or not, since he has no hopes if I'm once there. Oh, my dear friend, who can think of these things, not extremely miserable in her apprehensions? This mischievous sex, what had I to do with any of them, or they with me? I had not deserved this, or my own seeking, by my own giddiness, but I had brought myself into this situation. I wish all my heart. But how foolishly we are apt to wish when we find ourselves unhappy and know not how to help ourselves. On your mama's goodness, however, is my reliance. But if I can avoid being precipitated on either hand till my cousin Mordaunt arrives, a reconciliation must follow and all will be happy. I have deposited a letter for Mr. Lovelace, in which I charge him to avoid any rash step, any visit to Mr. Solmes which would be followed by acts of violence, as he would not oblige me forever. He would not disoblige me forever. I reassured him that I will rather soon die than be that man's wife. Whatever my usage, whatever the result of this interview, I insist upon his not presuming to offer violence to any friends, and express my high displeased that he should presume upon such an interest in my favor as to think himself entitled to dispute my father's authority in my own removal to my uncle, although I tell him that I will omit neither prayer nor contrivance, even to make myself ill to keep avoiding. Tomorrow is Tuesday. How soon comes upon us the day of dread. Oh, that deep sleep of 24 hours would seize my faculties. But then the next day would be Tuesday, and all effects and purposes for which I dreaded. If this reaches you before the event of this so much apprehended interview can be known, pray for your Clarissa Harlowe. Letter 77, Miss Clarissa Harlowe to Miss Howe. The day has come. Tuesday, 6 o'clock. I wish it were happily over. I have had a wretched night, hardly a wink. I slept ruminating upon the approaching interview. The view distance of time they have consented to has added solemnity to the meeting, which otherwise it would not have had. A thoughtful mind is not a blessing to be coveted, unless it had such a happy vivacity with it as yours, a vivacity which enables a person to enjoy the present without being over anxious about the future. Tuesday, 11 o'clock. I have had a visit from my Aunt Hervey, Betty. Betty, in her alarming way, told me I should have a lady to breakfast with me, whom I little expected, giving me belief that it was my mamma. This fluttered me such on hearing a lady coming upstairs, supposing it was she, not knowing how to account for her motives in such a visit, after having been so long banished from her presence, that my aunt at her entrance took notice of my disorder, and after the first salutation, why, miss, said she, you seem surprised. Upon my word, your thoughtful young ladies have strange apprehensions about nothing at all. What, taking my hand, can be a matter with you? Why, my dear, tremble at this rate. You'll be fit to be seen by everybody. Come, my love, kissing my cheek, plucking up courage. But this needless flutter on the approaching interview, when it is over, you will judge of your own antitheses and laugh at yourself for giving way to so an apprehension and imagination. I said that whatever we strongly imagined was, in its effect at time, more than imaginary, although to others it might not be so, that I had not rested 1 hour all night, that the impertinent set over me had fluttered me with giving me room to think that it was my mamma who was coming up to see me, and that at this rate I should be little qualified to see anybody I just liked to see. There was no accounting for these things, she said. Mr. Solmes last night supposed he would be under the same agitation as I. Who is it then, madame, so reluctant an interview on both sides is to please? Both of you, my dear. I hope after the first flurries are over, the most apprehensive beginnings I have often known make the happiest conclusions. there can be but one happy conclusion to the intended visit, and that is that both sides may be satisfied that it will be the last. She then represented how unhappy it would be for me if I did not suffer myself to be prevailed upon. She pressed me to receive him as became my education and declared that my apprehensions at seeing me were owing to his love and his awe, intimidating that true love was best known by fear and reverence, and that no blustering, craving lover could deserve encouragement. To this I answered that constitution was a great deal to be considered, that a man of spirit would act like one and could do nothing meanly, that a creeping mind would creep in everywhere where it had a view to obtain a benefit by, and insult where it had power and nothing to expect. That this is not a point now to be determined with, that I had said as much as I possibly could say on this subject, that this interview was imposed upon me by those indeed who would have had right to impose it, but that it was sorely against my will complied with, and for this reason there was an aversion, not willfulness, in the case, and so nothing could come of it, but a pretense, as much as I apprehended to use me still more severely than had been used. She then was pleased to charge me with prepossession and prejudice, expatiated upon the duty of a child, imputed to me abundance of fine qualities, but told me that in this case, that of persuadableness was wanting to crown all. She insisted upon the merit of obedience, although my will were not in it. From a little hint I gave of my greater dislike to see Mr. Holmes on the account of the freedom I had treated him with, she talked to me of his forgiving disposition, of his infinite respect for me, and I cannot tell what of this sort. I have never found myself to be so fretful in my life. I told my aunt so, and begged her pardon, but she said it was well disguised then, for she saw nothing but little tremors usual with young ladies when they were to see their admirers for the first time, as this might be called, for this is the first time I consented to see him in that light. But that next, oh, how, madame, interrupted I, it is then imagined that I give this meeting upon that foot? To be sure it is, child. To be sure it is, madame. Then do I yet desire to decline it. I will not, I cannot see him, if he expects me to see him upon those terms. Nice punctuello, mere punctuello, niece. Can you think that your appointment, day, place, hour, and knowing what the intent of it is to be interpreted away as mere ceremony and mean nothing? Let me tell you, my dear, your father, mother, uncles, everybody respect this appointment at first act of your compliance with their wills, and therefore receive not, I desire you, but make merit of what cannot be helped. Oh, this hideous wretch, pardon me, madame, I to be supposed to me and as that, with such a view, as he is to be armed with such expectation. But it cannot be that he expects it. Whatever others may, it is plain he cannot, by fear, he tells you all he shall have to see me. If his hope were so audacious, he could not fear so much. Indeed, he has this hope, and justly founded too. But his fears arises from his reverence, as I told you. His reverence, his unworthiness to this so apparent that he himself sees it, as well as everybody else. Hence the purchase he aims at it. Hence it is that settlements are to be made up for acknowledged want of merit. His unworthiness, say you? Not so fast, my dear. Does not this look like setting up a high value for yourself? We have all exalted notions of your merit, niece, but nevertheless, if it would not be wrong if you were to arrogate less to yourself, though more which we may do than your friends attribute to you. I am sorry, madame, it should be thought arrogance and suppose that I'm not worthy of a better man than Mr. Solmes, both as to person and mind, and as to fortune. I thank God I despise all that can be insisted upon in his favor from such a poor plea. She told me that it signified nothing to talk. I knew the expectation of everyone. Indeed, I did not. It was impossible I could think of such a strange expectation upon a compliance made only to show that I would comply in all that was in my power to comply with. I might easily, she said, have supposed that everyone thought that I was beginning to oblige them, all by the kind behavior of my brother and sister in the garden last Sunday, by my sister's visit to me afterwards in my chamber, although both more stiffly received by me than either wished or expected, by my Uncle Harlow's affectionate visit to me the same afternoon, not indeed so gratefully received as I used to receive his favors, but this he kindly imputed to my displeasure I had conceived at my confinement and to my coming on. I could not keep myself in continence from my past opposition. See, my dear, the low cunning of that Saturday management, which then so much surprised me, and see the reason why Dr. Lewin was admitted to visit me, yet forbore to enter upon a subject that I thought he came about to talk to me about. For it seems there was no occasion to dispute with me on one point that I was supposed to have conceded to. See also how unfairly my brother and sister must have represented their pretended kindness, when, though they had an end to answer by appearing kind, their antipathy to me seems to have been so strong that they could not help insulting me by their arm-in-arm lover-like behavior to keep to each other, as my sister afterwards likewise did when she came to borrow my Kempis. I lifted up my hands and eyes. I cannot, said I, give this treatment a name. The end, so unlikely to be answered by means so low. I know whose the whole is. He that could get my Uncle Harlow to contribute his part and procure the acquiescence of the rest of my friends to it must have the power to do anything with them against me. Again, my aunt told me that talking and invective now I have given the expectation would signify nothing. She hoped that I would not show them all that I have been too forward in their constructions, that they have been too forward in their constructions of my desire to oblige them. She has assured me that it would be worse for me now if I receded than if I never advanced. Advanced, madame? How can you say advanced? Why, what trick upon me? A poor, low trick, pardon, madame. I don't say you have hand in it, but my dearest aunt, tell me, will not my mamma be present at this dread interview? Will she not so favor me? Will it be to qualify? Qualify, my dear, interrupted she. Your mamma and your Uncle Harlow will not be present on this occasion for the world. Oh, then, madame, how can I look upon my consent to this interview as an advance? My aunt was displeased at this home push. Miss Clary, she said, there is no dealing with you. It would be happy for you and everyone else were your obedience as ready as your wit. I will leave it to you. Not in anger, I hope, madame, interrupted I. All I meant was to observe that let the meeting issue as it must issue. It cannot be a disappointment to anybody. Oh, miss, you seem to be a very determined young creature. Mr. Solmes will be here at your time, and remember once that upon the coming afternoon depends upon the peace of your family and your whole happiness. And so saying, down she hurried. Here I stop. In what I shall resume, or when it is not left for me to conjecture, much less to determine. I am excessively uneasy. No news from your mamma, I doubt. I will deposit thus far for fear of the worst. I do my best, my only friend.